On this episode of Tech in Boston podcast, I sat down with C.A. Webb, the executive director of the New England Venture Capital Association. Don't forget to go and check out previous episodes at techinboston.co and follow on Twitter at techinboston. Hey CA, thanks for coming on the Tech in Boston podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So, start with background on the New England Venture Capital Association for people that might not know who you guys are, what you're up to. Give a background.
Sure. So the New England Venture Capital Association represents the 90 VC firms in town and our portfolio companies in service of making Massachusetts the best place in the world to start and grow new companies. So we do marketing and PR on behalf of the ecosystem, helping folks find the rising stars, the awesome exits, the great deals that are happening here in New England. We build community among VCs and entrepreneurs. We connect up with universities to help students find their way into our portfolio companies or find capital if they're actually starting their own. And then we do advocacy. So there are some select issues at the city, state, and federal level that really are the key to unlocking innovation here in Massachusetts and making this a more entrepreneur-friendly environment. For example, we have been very outspoken advocates on behalf of banning non-compete agreements in Massachusetts.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that later, but let's talk about that for a second.
Sure.
So, obviously, the non-compete thing is a hot button. So maybe for people that don't know why it's such a big deal, talk about why everybody's trying to ban non-competes.
Sure. So it's pretty common practice when an employer gives a new employee a job offer to ask them to sign an employment agreement. Some of them are a page or two, some are much more elaborate. It's also very common in the tech industry for there to be a paragraph that says, once you leave this company, you may not work for a competitor, and the employer can define what competitor means. It can be narrow, it's often quite broad, for X number of years.
Yep.
It's pretty common practice for that agreement to be at least 2 years.
Do they make, in your experience, they make everybody sign it? Like somebody, more junior, my level has to sign it, or all just up to executives with, serious IP?
It is common that every employee is asked to sign that. It's a legal document. The company went through, some pain to design and sort of make perfect for them.
Yep.
And yes, everyone's asked to sign it. The thing that's been very interesting as we've dug into the use of non-compete agreements is we found that across Massachusetts, they're used pervasively across industries. So it's not just the tech community that faces them, but it's hourly workers. It's folks folks who are cutting hair, selling cars, Jimmy John's
There was a New York
sandwich
Times,
makers. I mean, it's really appalling. Someone's making $8 an hour.
Hey, that's serious. He might know the recipe.
Right, for a ham sandwich.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up.
So
you guys are trying to. There's been a big movement, a lot of influential people in the area to get on. But talk about working with local and state officials to kind of figure out how we get rid of that stuff.
Sure. So, the interest in this is one in our collective interest. So it's that, the interest of any one company should not come ahead of the interests of all of us. We want to create a thriving ecosystem where new companies can readily start and grow. So we see these as a real hindrance to new teams forming. Now, let me just be clear. We are absolutely advocates of corporate protections for companies.
Yeah, so it doesn't mean that I'm free to go take everything that I learned at Privy, go start another company with the same business. There's obviously got to be some give and take, but gives me the freedom to go to work for another company.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. So we believe in the active use and enforcement of NDAs, non-solicitation agreements, trademarks, patents, etc. But we believe that non-compete agreements are sort of cheap and easy tools that employers use that end up both having a practical and a chilling effect on employees who abide by them and miss out, 24 months on the beach while they watch the technology that they really understand deeply leapfrog ahead. And guess what? That idea is not irrelevant 24 months later, and they miss the chance to start an awesome new company here in Massachusetts.
What's it going to take to actually get rid of non-competes?
So it's a legislative issue. So it's not a law that's on the books, but it's a court precedent that's built over many years that tends to favor the employer. So the legislature would actually have to decide to ban non-compete agreements here. That happened in California. We believe that that's one reason why that ecosystem has flourished over the last 20 years. So we need to get the Senate and House on board. with enacting a new law which would ban non-compete agreements. We made a go at it. So Governor Patrick is a big proponent of this.
Okay.
And we worked with him and his administration, and we got the Senate on board for some reform in the spring. The House did not get on board. So we did a lot of good education. The session closed. We have kind of recalibrated our efforts, and we're going to go back and work again with the Senate and the House and try to persuade them of the wisdom of this.
But it feels like even still, obviously, hopefully that gets passed, but it sounds like there's more awareness now within the tech community than there was before, and it seemed like a lot of people, I know there was a whole signature list that went around, including a few people who said, we had non-competes, we're going to rip those up. So it sounds like making progress.
That's been really cool. So companies like Runkeeper and Acquia have just decided to ban non-compete agreements in their companies.
And those are two big, well-known companies that are important here in Boston. So to hear that guys like that are doing it, I'm sure it's a great case study to then talk to other companies.
That's right. And I've talked with individual tech workers who've said, I just was offered a new job, and I just said to them, I will not sign a non-compete.
Yeah.
And the employer was kind of stunned. Right. But it created a thoughtful conversation, and at least in one case I know that worker prevailed. Yeah,
and I'm sure for a lot of people, especially people that may have never changed jobs, some of the younger, this is my first job at a startup, for example, you just kind of sign whatever's given to you, right? You're given this package, and you're like, cool, I just got $100,000 to go be an engineer somewhere. Like, of course I'm going to sign this.
Yes,
right?
we click user agreements every day, right? When we download
terms and conditions are hidden behind every little box.
It's sort of sure, I agree. I want to use this. I want to
have a job. So you guys, NEVCA, sounds like a group for VCs, and that was kind of what the old, I guess mission was, but I've seen personally, you guys have been more involved lately, doing some stuff like recruitment guide for colleges, really getting involved on both sides, so startup and VCs, right?
That's right. So this organization's been around for 40 years. And I'd say for the first 35, it was largely a networking group for the venture capital, partner community. And over the last 5, we've really evolved toward being an ecosystem level organization. So, our mission is to make this the best place in the world to start and grow new companies. We don't do that alone as investors. We do that, in collaboration with obviously entrepreneurs, with government, with community leaders, et cetera.
And it seems like you have a board of some pretty influential people on both the VC and the, tech company side of things.
That's right. So one big shift for us is we used to have a board only made up of venture capital partners, and that represents everything from seed funds in town like NextView to the big diversified funds that have been around for a long time like Bessemer. And we just over the last year have started adding leading entrepreneurs to our board. And that's just had a really cool effect and added a lot of energy to the organization.
Who's an example of somebody that people might know?
Ellen Rubin from Clear Sky Data, serial entrepreneur. A lot of folks know. Mike Troiano at Actifio. He's a CMO over there, serial entrepreneur as well.
Former podcast guest as well.
Hey, there you go.
We only strive for the best. And like, how do you define your job? So you were kind of took this role over, what do you focus on a day-to-day basis? Like, you came in today and you're doing what?
Yeah, well, first of all, I had worked in a series of startups before taking this job, and I had this kind of crazy idea about 3 years ago that I didn't want to be inside another operating company. I was always kind of looking over the fence and curious about what lots of companies were doing, and I'm just sort of an ecosystem level thinker. So I had this wild idea, and I went to a couple of friends who are VCs, really just a friend to friend, and I said, so I'm imagining this job where I still work in the startup community because I love hanging out with people who don't see problems but see opportunities. Yep. I definitely want to be in the city. I'd been commuting from the city to Waltham for way too long, and I kind of had it with that. I'm an urban person through and through. And I wanted to contribute to writing the next chapter for Boston and for Massachusetts. And these friends kind of laughed at me in a very loving way and said, that sounds like a great job,
sounds like the best job, right?
Good luck with that. And a month later, they actually both independently called me. They'd been at an NEVCA board meeting, and they said, you know what? Here is an organization you could make amazing things happen with.
Yeah.
We are sort of in a period of recalibration. A lot of the VCs that have been out in the burbs are moving into the city. We're really starting to think about things on an ecosystem level. You could help us define our vision and really build out a meaningful work plan and do things in this community that really fill critical gaps, provide more muscle to make things happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen some pretty big names you've been able to wrangle in for speakers, Sheryl Sandberg, Brad Feld, other people like that. So how do you get people like that?
Oh, those have been kind of opportunistic things.
Yeah.
I read somewhere that Lean In was going to happen. This was
Yeah.
before it was being promoted, but I knew Cheryl was working on it. And
Yeah.
I just mentioned to a couple of our board members, I mean, one cool thing about VCs, right, is they tend to be pretty well networked.
Right.
And so I said to Joe Tango, actually, at KFM Partners, hey, Cheryl's writing this book. She's inevitably going to do a book tour. We should be her host. Like, let's bring her to Boston.
Yeah.
And he pinged her in the meeting.
Awesome.
She wrote back 60 seconds later, and we had a plan.
So is that a good example of what you're trying to do? Like in a nutshell, like these events that bring kind of both sides together?
Yeah, I think even more so the NEVCA is a demonstration of that. So, we, a lot of us in the community observed that the New England culture tends to be one where we're hard workers. We put our heads down and we power through. And, by the way, along the way, we've built some pretty awesome companies.
Yeah.
And we thought it would be a useful thing in terms of building the culture where we really actively celebrate one another and take note of these successes to find the right way to do that. So
NEVCA is awards?
The NEVCA is a big award show we do every May. Most recently at the House of Blues, 700 VCs and entrepreneurs and community members come out to celebrate things like Deal of the Year, Exit of the Year, Rising Star Entrepreneur, and so on. And, our observation was the world doesn't really need another award show.
Yeah.
And we were not going to do another chicken dinner in a hotel ballroom. But our community needed a reason to just like celebrate one another and rally and have a really, kind of kick-ass party. So we developed this really cool party that, midway through the lights go down and we have this really fun, high energy half hour.
Yeah, I saw some pictures. Looked like you had a good time.
It's great. It's great.
Do you have are there any stories of like, I'm sure it's just good networking at a thing like that, even more than normal, right? You have all these people in one room and.
Yeah, I mean, I think for young entrepreneurs, there's been some just, kind of star factor of, wow, I was having a conversation with this really nice guy, and then I realized it was Rich Miner, the inventor of Android.
Yeah.
So there's some of that. And then there's some of just this, oh my gosh, there aren't that many moments in the course of my year where I'm in the room with what feels like a critical mass of the people that are building the best companies right now, both the really young upstarts and the big behemoths. And this is something that brings those together. And by the way, it's both tech and healthcare. And our communities don't tend to play together that much, although increasingly we're seeing convergences in our worlds around things like digital health and healthcare IT.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's one of the things that's kind of been a common theme is, you're a startup founder, having a network of people who are going through the same problems to be able to say, even if you are in healthcare or a different type of business, to be able to, talk to about a more high level problem, I think has been super helpful. So
Yes.
Transition to talk about your background a little bit, because I'm interested in that. Like, your background isn't in VC. You were doing marketing.
Yep.
So talk about marketing, Whole Foods, Care.com.
Yeah. So I guess the common thread in my career is I've always been drawn to movements, sort of social phenomena that are at a critical tipping point. So I worked in ed reform when charter schools were still kind of a very new concept. I built a program at a charter school in Dorchester. I worked at Whole Foods Corporate when, in 2006, when that whole sort of natural, healthy living movement was at a really exciting tipping point. And I love thinking about how you drive cultural change. And so I've worked inside both nonprofit and for-profit companies that are really on the vanguard of that. And I see this work very much in line with that. A lot of what we're doing here at NEVCA is about, being provocateurs, about being catalysts, about, again, bringing muscle so that we can pull levers and make change accelerate here. So one thing I've spent a lot of time thinking about and talking about with leaders across our community is the issue of women in tech and women in venture. I'm a Wellesley College grad. I'm also a woman, and I also
just for those of you listening at home,
I have a daughter who is 14 months old,
yeah.
and wicked smart, and I want her to be able to walk into any company she wants to work for and be taken seriously.
So what's the biggest thing missing with women in tech, and specifically in Boston? Like, we want to be at a place 5 years from now where it's an even split or whatever the number might be. What's the biggest thing missing right now that we're not doing right?
So I think we actually have an amazing, talented women inside a wide array of companies, but I don't think they have critical mass inside those companies. And the nature of startups tend to be, when you're in this high growth mode, you are head down, and that culture can be pretty insular. So I've
Yeah.
spoken with really talented women that might have been employed, 15 or 10 or 20. And she's, kind of upper mid level. She's not on the executive team, but she has a significant leadership role inside her company. And she's just not meeting other women like her. She's
Yeah.
working with all guys. And she'd love to connect with other women because there are just things about being a minority in a culture that are different and that are helpful to strategize around.
Yeah, as somebody who's spent the last 5 years working with majority of males, the two best bosses I've had have both been women, and
Interesting.
definitely need more.
Yeah,
Need
interesting.
more of a mix. Just
I mean,
so many things we could talk about.
yeah, I mean, there's great data that this drumbeat of the conversation around women in tech and women in venture is really reaching a fever pitch just in the last month, even. And there's been great research. I mean, a steady stream of research that's coming out that says again and again that diverse teams are better teams. They, when you look at Fortune 1000 companies, they yield greater returns. And so there's just an economic imperative for building diverse thinking teams. And often diverse thinking does actually come in diverse packages. So I've been really emboldened by leaders in our community, many of them men, many of them VCs, and CEOs of fast growing tech companies who've said, look, this is actually ridiculous that in 2014, we're not, given all the women that we studied alongside in our PhD programs and our MBA programs and our undergrad programs, that they're not here working inside our companies and our firms. And so one of the cool things about drilling down on this problem on a Boston level or a Massachusetts level is it can start to feel like a problem that actually is not intractable. It's not just this big, hairy social problem that we wring our hands over and say, well, maybe it will change over the course of generations. We can actually start to talk about localized solutions that we as leaders inside companies can start doing things about. So I have a couple of initiatives that are, I'm teaming up with some other organizations in town, some other individuals in town to give lift off to. And one of them actually back to this idea of this cohort of women that are building amazing domain expertise and functional expertise inside companies, but tend to be very much in the minority as women in these companies. We're going to pull together a cohort of them. I'm working with Intelligently, and we're going to build an awesome management and peer networking program.
Yeah, I think the peer thing is a great idea, because one of the things that's been really interesting, in just doing this as a side project, is that people are. It's really easy to always get CEOs and founders to talk about certain things, but there's a need, and people want to hear about my peer at a different company, right? Somebody who is maybe 5 years in their career doing sales.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the CEO of that company, but find me somebody on that level
who I can really relate to.
And I think that's where there's a huge opportunity.
That's cool.
So did you know anything about VC before you started doing this?
Yeah, I mean, I've had good friends who've raised venture money, who've started and grown companies. I had actually, when I was at Preserve, which is a design-driven consumer brand, creating really cool eco-friendly products on the Waltham, I actually had spent time talking with institutional investors. I was on the executive team at that company. I ran marketing. And I spent time with our CEO and CFO going out and meeting with investors. So I had some exposure. I certainly had a lot to learn, and I learn about this world every day.
Yeah. What's something that you thought you knew before, but that's changed now that you're kind of sitting up here, or maybe not changed, but just something you didn't know that's clearer now?
I think one is just a social observation. I just think the people who have money in their pockets are automatically given kind of a level of respect, like they just carry prestige in a community of people who don't have money and wish they had money or are trying to raise money.
Right.
And I think that dynamic can be unfortunate because
right off the bat, the balance of power is immediately.
And just because you have money doesn't mean you're a good investor. And so, our industry has been under a lot of scrutiny over the last 3 years that I've been in this role. Kauffman Foundation wrote a really sort of an indictment of our industry saying, look, it's only really the top quartile of venture firms that yield positive returns for their investors. And so I've been interested in that. I think that as this is evolving, it's, people kind of refer to it as a game often. There are all these jocular terms we use to talk about the VC game. It's, it's a business. And if you don't, have good economics in your business, you shouldn't be open. And so I think the scrutiny and the expectations heightening is actually a good thing for all of us.
Yeah. So you're out there talking to a million people, million VCs. You have a network of them. There's something that stands out. First, talk about VCs. There's something that stands out. The ones that people really like and the really good ones, they have something in common other than a track record. Because obviously you want to go get a check from the guy who's, 10 exits of companies everybody knows.
Yeah. Look, I mean, in the back of my head, I have my book of people that when I'm starting my next company,
of course,
I will never talk with about raising money, and those who I will eagerly go talk with. I think it just comes down to integrity.
Yeah, what separates those two things?
It comes down to integrity and understanding your place. I've had some friends raise money lately who ended up raising money from investors who I think were really just too hands-on, who exerted too much influence as early investors. And granted, some of my friends were first-time entrepreneurs and probably weighted their investors' opinions too heavily at times. And that, in a couple of cases, had some pretty negative repercussions.
That's interesting because I've heard a bunch of people that have said, you want somebody with experience that is hands-on, but there's a balance of, I need to go and run this company.
Yeah.
I'll let you know when I need some help and where you can help in.
I mean, all of us as professionals and certainly as entrepreneurs learn to leverage wisdom and insight and advice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a talent. Mm-hmm. People who ask great questions, who really dig in and can have an advisor, can have a board member, an investor that they really go deep with and get inside their head and ask them to help them think about how they think about critical problems. And that's, I think, a way, an amazing VC can be just so incredibly helpful.
Right.
So, you kind of know them when you see them.
Yeah. Are there a handful of people and companies in Boston that you know about that other people will start hearing about shortly? Like, who are the companies that get you fired up as somebody who's, you wake up and you start thinking about the ecosystem as a whole every day?
Well, I'll tell you, I got one of the nicest compliments just yesterday from someone actually here at Highland who said, we are so impressed with what you're doing with the Nevies because all of the nominees that your academy chose are companies who've had really cool things happen over the last 6 months since the Nevies happened. Like, you guys are spotting truly the rising stars.
Yeah.
And, we have a good filter. And clearly we're using data to design that filter, but there is some element certainly in things around like the rising star entrepreneur that there's also, it's highly qualitative. Mm-hmm. So that made me feel really good that we're spotting great people. Yeah. I mean, one really fun one that I have kept my eye on that I just think is so cool, and I was glad to see they raise money and they're growing, is Super Pedestrian. They're creating this this bike that is it's powered, so the wheel actually generates energy, and you can just zoom up a hill, sort of at rapid
So you pedal,
speed. Right?
But when you hit the hill that you don't want to pedal up, it just takes over.
Yeah,
for you.
exactly,
Awesome.
exactly.
They're here.
Yeah, I think they're out in Davis Square.
It's great. I'll have to look them up.
Yeah,
it's a great name too. Super Pedestrian.
Isn't that a great name?
Yeah. So last kind of tactical question. You're a marketing person. Have a lot of marketing people that listen. And what's your biggest marketing pet peeve that you've?
Where was I? I was reading a magazine the other day, and there was an ad that was so bad, I wanted to tear it out and send it back to the company with like Sharpie over it. It just like...
See edits below.
Yeah, it was kind of like, buy this because we sell it.
Oh.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah, it's good.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought you were going to say like direct mail or something.
No, it's like, what are the benefits for me?
Yeah.
I mean, I just think as marketers, we talk all the time about user experience, but I don't think we can spend enough time really standing in the shoes of our users, sitting alongside them. I admire so much CEOs who still, every week sit in the call center, go out, on the road and really sit down with users.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like over the last couple of years, the whole voice of the customer thing has used to be only in like product and customer support, and I think now marketing and sales are starting to really pay attention to that stuff as well.
Yes.
It sounds like your role today here is a lot of marketing. You have to kind of know marketing to be successful with what you guys are trying to do. Build out the brand a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's lean marketing. It's,
I saw the whiteboard. There's a lot of stuff on there.
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot. Certainly, we do, email and social media, and we're doing a lot of, we get, the really cool thing is as we've built credibility in the community and have been a leader on really critical issues, and I think are just regarded with respect. I mean, people know we're fun and we have great intentions and we're here working in a very entrepreneurial way. We get a lot of inbound interest. So I inherited an organization that only had 60 member firms when I came in 3 years ago, and we're now up to 90, and 10 of those came in as inbound inquiries this year.
Is that 100% of Boston?
Basically, there are a couple outliers.
And what does New England actually mean? Like, are you...
It basically means
Boston?
Massachusetts, but we have a member in Maine and Vermont and Rhode Island, and it's largely Massachusetts.
Cool. So, wrap up and tell people where they can find more information about you guys, events, and that kind of stuff.
Sure. So we're online at newenglandvc.org. We're on Twitter at newenglandvc. We are on LinkedIn. We're on Facebook, and we would love to hear from you. So I always tell my board members and folks who are active with us that we love feedback, and we love critical feedback. So if we're missing the mark, if we're missing an opportunity, we want to hear about it. And most of all, we want to partner up with leaders in this community who see opportunities to expedite the growth of this ecosystem. So we can part with something I'm really psyched about right now.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I extended a full-time job offer to a new team member. So it's only 2 of us here at the NEVCA with some awesome interns from Northeastern and MIT Sloan. But we're hiring a new full-time person who's going to be exclusively focused on building a machine for channeling hundreds of students into tech internships every year. So we're working in partnership with the Mass Technology Collaborative and their Mass Technology Internship Program, which, take note, tech companies, they have $1 million every year they're distributing and matching funds for interns.
Yeah.
So if you have $5,000 to spend on interns this spring, they can double that for you and put $10,000
And for what it's
there.
worth, like in the early days, interns can be some of the most important. You need somebody who's going to roll up their sleeves and make 100 phone calls for you to get 30 leads. And
Completely.
Guess what?
So whether you're a 20-person company or certainly, I was just talking with Acquia last week about this. I mean, they're growing so rapidly, they can't hire enough junior talent. And so they said to us, look, we want to be big backers of this internship program because that's where we're going to find the people we need to hire.
And one of the really good pieces of advice, I mean, I haven't experienced, I don't know if it's really good, but I thought it was interesting was advice for students is don't necessarily go out and start your first company right out of college, but the best experience can be get a job at a seed or Series A stage company, learn about everything inside there, and then go figure out if you still want to do that.
Understand the problem, go deep on domain expertise, functional expertise, and then take that and change the world.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this. What's your Twitter?
CA_Webb. Okay. I have to talk to Wayne about getting rid of that underscore.
That's not so bad. You stand out. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye.